Hello, my fellow dragons, and welcome back to my channel where the dragons gather. Today, we are gathering for me to do a little book review and create a sim. So, today we will be covering The Blanks by Grady Hendrix. It is a short horror story. Personally, Grady Hendrix is one of my favourite authors. I'll read the synopsis for you before we dive into the book. If you think this is your kind of thing, then please support the author by getting a copy of their book. Grady Hendrix is an extremely talented writer, and if you're not sure if you're going to like his work, then I would suggest going to Amazon and downloading a free sample if you have a Kindle and just maybe having a read of that, or going on to Goodreads and reading some of the reviews. I'll also be reading the synopsis for this book shortly for you as well, so to give you an idea of whether you think you might enjoy this book. I know sometimes you download a free sample of a book, and if it turns out the rest of the book is nothing like the example you downloaded. I've had that happen to me more times than I like to think about. I spent good money on books that seemed really good, and it turned out they were just really good at writing the bit before the sample ended, and after that it just went downhill. But I can guarantee you that Grady Hendrix's talent and writing style are consistent throughout his books. Alternatively, you could maybe give this one a try. It's only 35 pages long, but let me tell you, he does a hell of a lot with just 35 pages. Also, this is on Kindle Unlimited, and if you don't have Kindle Unlimited, it's only 99p to buy it at the moment. So I didn't read the description for the book before I started reading it, but for those of you who do want that, it says residents have an unspoken pact with the island's unnatural inhabitants. Ignore them, live happily. But in New York Times best-selling author Grady Hendrix's thrilling short story, One Boy Can't Look Away, and pays the price. Jekyll Island offers Rachel's children the chance to spend summers roaming wild and free as long as they follow the rules. But when her son comes face to face with a terror they dare not speak of, she must prepare for their perfect world to change forever. Grady Hendrix's The Blanks is part of The Shivers, a collection of haunting stories that reveal the otherworldly terrors all around us. Once you know there's no going back, read or listen to each story in one unsettling sitting. So if that sounds like your sort of thing and you haven't already read this book or bought it, then please go ahead and get it now. And then please come back to this video and we can have a little chat about what you took from the book. For everyone else, there are going to be spoilers. I'm afraid I can't avoid them. I have tried, but I cannot avoid them. And just for those of you who need it, here are the trigger warnings. There will be animal death, which is unfortunately is implied that's quite violent. There's no details, but it is implied that it wasn't an easy death. There is potential alcohol abuse. There is drugging of a child, and there is death of a child. So if any of those things are triggering to you, then now is your chance to jump off the video and come back for the next one, which should be another Sims playthrough. So shouldn't be anything triggering in that for you. Okay, my loves, for everyone who stayed, we'll get into the book review. We start with a family boarding a ferry. While they're boarding, the mother, the main character of our story, notices another woman named Sherry Litvak also trying to board. They just won't let her on. The mother, whose name we later learn is Rachel, is relieved to see a safety volunteer, or Savo, stopping Sherry from getting on the ferry. When Ferry tells them people are waiting for her, Rachel thinks to herself, no one in Woodbreeze wants to see Sherry Litvak this year. Nothing really weird about that. There's always going to be people in a community that no one really gets on with. Honestly, I just assumed that she was maybe kind of demanding or flaunted her wealth around a little too much. Something that made her feel unseemly to the rest of the community, and didn't think anything more of it than that. Once the family reached Jekyll Island, we're dropped into a beautifully idyllic summer. The family sat out on the porch with their friend Tom Docks, shucking oysters and drinking margaritas and chatting. It's the kind of summer you remember from movies, or if you're lucky enough, from when you were a kid. Just an aside, I remember when every summer my family would drive 2 hours to a beach in Christchurch. We'd catch a little boat over the water, or we'd catch a little train, depending which car park we used, to get to the beach. We'd spend a few hours there, then we'd head back, walk around the old castle ruins and the canal, and go to a place called the Copper Skillet for dinner. It was idyllic and nostalgic, more so for the fact that we can no longer do that because the Copper Skillet is gone. It's a golden memory in my mind where I can still taste the pancakes at the Copper Skillet, or remember my dad carving boats into the sand for me to sit in and play in. Where I can still remember my mum sunbathing while I splashed in the too cold ocean. This might seem a bit like a tangent, but I think it'll be more relevant later. Anyway, they're sitting and chatting, and after Tom leaves, there's discussion about how he made his money. Everyone seems to have their own theory, or Tom has told them all a different story. That too kind of feels idyllic. The idea that he's told them all something different, not out of maliciousness, but more because it maybe amuses him. No one takes offence to it, it's that kind of community. We get a brief scene of Rachel alone with her husband. Rachel mentions Sherry. There's a brief discussion, an implication of blame. They say the Litvaks shouldn't have stayed after the end of season. There's a mention of John's drinking. This is the first indication we get that something bad may have happened to Sherry and her husband John. Honestly, I assumed it was something to do with John's drinking, maybe an accident or DV. Just this passing conversation skews the perfection for just a moment. One minute I was wrapped in a warm, cosy blanket of a summer night on a beach, and the next there's something bitter in the sweetness. It's small but noticeable. There's somewhat of an implication of annoyance there too, like the Litvaks somehow ruined something for everyone else. There's an irritation there that might not be logical, but does feel very human. There's certainly a surprising lack of empathy, like the Litvaks betrayed the community, or like they didn't ever really belong, so whatever happened to them was somewhat expected. It's over in a scene, but it lingers like a bad taste for a while. We get to the next day, and we get some backstory about how the island is changing, how it used to be a secret place where you had to know someone who already knew about it to get invited in. Kind of a club made up mostly of people they already knew on the mainland, normally from the same neighbourhood. Now it's filled with more and more people they don't know. It's the kind of thing you see everywhere. The little beach that you only used to go to is now swarmed with holidaymakers. Or that woodland that you used to go to for a walk with your dad when you were little, every Sunday morning without fail. The one with the public toilets that had the hard plastic toilet paper that made you think leaves might be a better option, and where at the end your dad would lift you up and plunk you down on the old wooden counter of the tiny hut, selling cakes and teas. The one where the lady would delightedly ask you what you wanted, and you always picked out chocolate cake. And she always had chocolate cake in because chocolate is so popular, but when you were a kid, it felt like she had it just for you. The place where you were a kid was sacred, and you felt loved by this total stranger you only saw once a week, but you was always so pleased to see you, and you felt safe because you had your dad, and nothing bad could happen when you had your dad with you. You don't remember when it stopped, but you do know it did. You go back years later, and the hut is still there, but someone else is running it, and they don't have the chocolate cake, and they don't look at you like she did. You're just a faceless customer, and there are so many now. The car park is packed with strange cars and frustrated faces trying to find somewhere to park. The sound of water is the same. The public toilets are the same, but now they have proper toilet paper. Everything is the same, but it's not. Something is skewed, and it's hard not to blame the people that have stumbled across something you felt was sacred and rare. They can't take your memories away, but everything else feels more stressful, more chaotic than it did before. It feels like you have to fight to find a space for yourself where before the place just welcomed you in. There's a certain feeling of being smug for having known about it first, but resentment because the new people have changed it without even knowing they've changed it, without having ever known it before. Sorry, got a bit lost in the metaphor there. There's a suggestion that this place is changing, but at the same time, Rachel is both resentful of that, but also smug. That by the time it fully gentrifies and loses what was special about it, they'll be done with it anyway. It'll have served its purpose for them. They'll have perfect memories, and this place will be preserved for them like an insect in amber. Rachel tries to talk to her friend Jen about Sherry, but Jen doesn't want to talk about it. Instead, they talk about the new dog Jen's family have. Then the conversation takes a strange turn, talking about the family's old dog, Cosmo, and how the poor creature met its end. And I quote, "Who knew deer could be so aggressive?" End quote. And if that doesn't send chills down your spine, it's because I'm not fully conveying how chilling and confusing that line is. Like a cloud passing over the sun and casting you into shadow, or a sudden chilly wind that reminds you summer has ended and you're fully into autumn now. It comes out of nowhere. They briefly go back to talking about Sherry, but only long enough for more blame to be laid at Sherry's feet. Then the conversation moves on like nothing was ever said, just ignoring the uncomfortable parts because that's how you protect yourself. We skip forward 2 weeks. It's an innocent enough evening. The owners are all going to watch the sunset on a Friday night because the renters all leave on the 5 p.m. ferry. This leaves the island to only those that own properties on the island. Again, this kind of elitist attitude coming out. This idea that people that own are superior to those that rent properties, not just because they own the properties here, but also because they found the place first and were able to buy. They even mention that there's construction taking place on the island to build more homes for the ever growing demand. Little slices of paradise being packaged up in quickly built holiday homes, but only for those that can afford it, only for those that the community deems worthy, I guess. We also get Rachel thinking about the fact that no one does any renovations around here. They don't fix up the places, they don't add anything on. It's considered tacky. The places are worth a lot of money, but a display of wealth is considered to be too much. They just don't bother doing it. Anyone who does is sort of looked down upon by the community. There's this unspoken rule that comes into play quite a lot. There are the outspoken rules of just ignore, but there's also the unspoken ones of don't stand out, do what everyone else does, conform. There is one property that was built by an architect and therefore has stained glass windows. And I kind of read it as Rachel looking down on it a little bit. Like it stood out, but not for the right reasons. It was like the woman who owned it was allowed to get away with this flamboyance, this dedication to some kind of art, but only because it was built by a particular architect. And that was the only reason. If she'd done this herself, she would have been out of the community faster than you can blink. It's on this night that Cal sees a blank. We're never really given a clear idea of what a blank is. The descriptions we do get are patchy at best, likely because everyone does their best to ignore them. But it also does play into that idea. The reason we call them blanks is because we don't know what they look like. To us, they are blank. To give them name gives them power, gives them a sense that we have acknowledged them, and that is dangerous. So therefore, we refer to them only as blanks. The first description we get is its thin body arcs impossibly over Tom, its dark head down by his ear, its ragged face turned up, watching, looking at Callum. And Callum is looking back, and that's the problem. Rachel doesn't hesitate. She grabs her son and pulls him away, stops him from looking, but the damage is done. Rachel desperately tries to get her son to believe her, to fully believe that what they saw was a deer, to make him replace the image of whatever he did see with that of a deer. There's a certain amount of desperation here, which will become more obvious as the story progresses. In this instance, as it was the first time I was reading the book, it seemed to me like this was obviously a tried and tested method. That if someone did see a blank, it wasn't all over. That you could reverse the damage if you could just convince the person that what they'd seen was something else entirely. That it was just a deer. That if you stopped acknowledging the blanks, if you just realised that what you'd seen was a trick of your imagination, everything would go back to normal and you would be fine. And I assumed that's what Rachel was trying to do here. From the way Rachel talks or thinks, it appears this behaviour from blank is unheard of. They simply don't act this way. That means that either Cal was incredibly unlucky or something has changed that's changed their behaviour. It seems likely that the construction and the increased numbers of people perhaps dislodged the blanks from their natural environment, or an increased the number of people in the area could also have changed their behaviour. We hear later from a different character that the numbers may also be increasing. This character speculates that it's global warming or maybe another environmental factor. I don't know. I think these little innocuous clues add a lot to the story. We don't really need to know what the blanks look like. We don't really need to know why their behaviour is changing. What is important is that the rules they so carefully cultivated to keep themselves safe and justify coming back to the island every year no longer work. The fail-safes have failed. However, knowing that things have changed gives us, the readers, justification for why we would never even take the risk to begin with. They took the risk because it was calculated. Same as getting in a car, getting on a plane. There's potential danger there, but the statistics are on your side. In other words, they're not complete monsters for subjecting their children to this place. But we as the readers can now feel somewhat superior in the idea that we would never do this ourselves. To us, this is an alien concept, and the fact that it's failed, to us, seems like that was inevitable. But if you put yourself back into their shoes, if you put this into another reality, like taking a child on holiday, and they don't realise that there's a riptide or an undertow or jellyfish or sharks, we take calculated risks every day. It's just for us, this feels like an extra big leap because the creatures are supernatural and not something we've been equipped to deal with. We're given rules of survival all the time, like wearing seatbelts in cars, always looking for red flags on beaches that tell you where the water's dangerous. Those rules are what society has built to keep us safe. And that's why we take these calculated risks. Otherwise, we never leave the house. That's what makes these characters so damn human, and it makes it so much more tragic what happens to them. They feel so real. And I think that's something that's very difficult to do, even in a horror story. I think the greats do it brilliantly. I think that Adam Neville, Stephen King, Grady Hendrix, and a plethora of other horror story writers really are great at giving you a human character that you can relate to, but also kind of sometimes feel a bit superior to because you think you wouldn't put yourself in that situation to begin with. And I think that's kind of the best part about horror. You can be one step removed because you can think, I wouldn't go upstairs when I heard the creaking, I'd leave and phone the police. But the person in the book will go upstairs because the horror story has to horror. And you can sit there feeling superior, knowing that this couldn't possibly happen to you because you wouldn't put yourself into that situation. And that's kind of the beauty of horror. Because in reality, how many times have we heard a creak in a house and told ourselves, stop being stupid? How many times have we taken our kids to the beach and told ourselves that the water is perfectly safe and nothing bad can happen to them? Because we have to live our lives, and this world is beautiful. And beauty sometimes comes with danger. And we have to let our children experience that. And unfortunately, letting our children experience that means letting them themselves expose themselves to danger in the safest way we possibly can. But anyway, that's just my thoughts. You may disagree with me entirely, and that's absolutely fine. As long as you keep it respectful, I don't mind. But that was just me, I guess, rambling a little bit in my own head. So back to the book. We now have a scene where Callum is trying to tell his mum what he saw, and Rachel is trying to tell Callum that he didn't see anything. And this is very difficult because she gets very annoyed with him. And I think from the way it's written, it's clear that if Callum usually has a problem, he can be open with his parents and tell them what that problem is, and then they resolve it together. Or that they have taught him that sharing a problem means that you can better rationalize it and work out a solution. But now Callum is being told by his mum, don't talk to me about this. It didn't happen. It's not happening. Do you understand me? It didn't happen. So where does that leave Callum? He now has this image in his head of what happened to Tom, of the thing that he saw leaning over Tom, and now he has a parent that refuses to acknowledge what he saw. That must make him feel more scared, because your parents are there to protect you. But how can they protect you if they don't fully understand the danger? They don't fully understand what you saw. So how is she going to protect him if she's just going to keep telling him it didn't happen to begin with? And it must be terrifying to see your mum getting that angry and that insistent, because she's not doing it because you're being naughty. You're not lying. You're telling the truth. And she's still punishing him for it in a weird kind of way. And I quote, stop arguing, I say, overruling him. Tom Docks is going to be embarrassed enough without you spreading rumours that he has passed out on the boardwalk, okay? Adults don't like everyone knowing their business. And if that's not a cut off to the conversation, I don't know what is. This is very much, this is a subject we will not breach. This is taboo. And at that point, he does drop the argument, but she does note that he doesn't go and play with his friends like he normally would. In fact, he sticks pretty close to his mum after that, which again, I think he's just seeking her comfort. And the way she's reacted has made him more scared than it has made him feel better about the whole situation. At some point, Rachel reaches out to a safety volunteer or Savo and tells them about Tom, but she doesn't mention the blank. She just says that she found Tom falling down and she thought he'd had a stroke. The way she conveys it to the Savo, though, makes it very clear that what's happened to Tom is not a stroke. It's not natural. It's a little while later that Rachel manages to isolate her husband long enough to tell him what happened. So what she tells him without trying to move her lips too much. So she's obviously trying to keep this whole thing a secret. And it goes, Callum saw a blank, I say. It got Tom Docks. What? Stephen asks, too loud, turning toward me. I grab his wrist to make him hold still. It was dragging Tom Docks off the boardwalk, I say, modelling a quieter voice for him to copy. I told Savo. Stephen breathes a little faster. He looks over at Zayla's, locates the kids. Did it see him? He asks. Only for a second, I say, minimizing. It's fine, it only lasted a second. He knows better, Stephen says, trying to slow his breathing. He swallows hard. Are you sure? I'm sure, I say. But it was so fast. We're fine. Nothing happened. Nothing. You'll forget about it by tomorrow. That whole scene has a lot going on. From the fact that she clearly doesn't want the neighbours to know, which feels more like this is a family secret, this is our business, nobody needs to know about it. Almost like it's something shameful. Not like their child's in danger, but like he's somehow done something wrong. And that's backed up in the way that Stephen speaks, that Callum knew better. He shouldn't have looked at the blank. There's almost this idea that somehow Callum has broken the social norms and it's embarrassed his parents. Their reactions are much more like he spilt wine on someone's dress than like he saw something that could potentially be dangerous to him. Even the way it was dealt with, very quietly telling the Savo what happened, giving them an excuse for why Tom would be in that situation to begin with, all of it is about, as she said, minimizing the situation. But is she minimizing it to protect her son, or is she minimizing it because she doesn't want it getting back to the community that their son has somehow done something wrong? All he did was look. All he did was give in to his curiosity, and that is enough for his parents to be standing there saying he kind of brought this on himself. This is kind of backed up with a scene that happens later, where Callum actually apologises to his parents for what happened. I'm sorry about today, Mum, he says, and he's about to start saying something else. I cut him off. It's okay, but you know now. So next time, you'll ignore it. She can feel he wants to say something else, but she won't let him. There's this, again, this idea that it's shameful whatever he's done and that we don't talk about what's shameful because that means bringing more shame or the chance that someone else will overhear our shame. So we brush it under the carpet, we ignore it, and we pretend it didn't happen. It's not like he put himself in danger to them. It's like I said before, it's like he's embarrassed his family. And let me be clear, I may sound like I'm being really harsh on the parents, but this could also be a coping mechanism. They are aware that their son was in danger, but if they don't make a big deal out of it, then it's not a big deal, if that makes sense. The more they scream and shout about it, the more real and dangerous it feels. If they act like it was a minor discretion, then hopefully the universe will see it as that as well, and they will continue living their lives as they have previously. We later find that a very sweet scene in which Rachel fell asleep and wakes up to find her son snuggled into her side. When she wakes up a second time, her husband is also in the same room and he's asleep, and she allows herself to relax and go back to sleep. We also now get the story around Tom. So it's been decided it was a heart attack, in inverted commas, and that unfortunately he passed away before reaching the mainland. They say there was a helicopter to carry him over, but no one mentions hearing or seeing a helicopter. It's another of those lies that they desperately tell themselves and each other, lies to keep you safe if you believe them hard enough. Lies to justify staying if you believe them hard enough. Largely, I think, to reinforce the false narrative in their own minds, but also as a display to the others around them. Look at how good I am. See how I'm not the weak link. I believe it was a heart attack completely and utterly. I still belong here. Don't kick me out. So anyway, later that day, Rachel is checking the house before it rains, when she finds Cal standing by the guest room window, staring out at something in the trees. It's confirmed pretty quickly that once again it's the blanks. This is where we get the second description of them. They're standing in the trees, barely 10 feet away, outlined by the standard's backyard light. There are more of them than I've ever seen before. Their tall, still shadows stand out against the trees. Their dead eyes reflect yellow in the house lights. All of them stare at the window. All of them stare at my son. This is all we get from Rachel, showing how much she took in of their appearance before she managed to shut the curtains and drag her son away. It also really relates back to the fact that she was trying so hard not to look at them. In the book, it describes how she's looking anywhere but at these things. She does not want to see them. We see a return to Rachel lying to her son. This time she's telling him they're just deer covered in ticks. That's what makes them look so strange. However, now she's lying because it's too late. I think she always knew it was too late, but hoped, like a lot of us, that pretending everything was okay would make it okay. What confirms her suspicion is a Savo outside their home, just watching them. There's something sinister in that. The way the monitoring has already started, simply because they know that the family found Tom. They don't even know about Cal yet, but they're already making moves, making sure that things go the way they're supposed to, already making clear signals to the family that there's no escape. Rachel tells her husband Stephen about Callum, and Stephen tries to make futile plans like leaving the island on the next ferry or calling the Lipbacks for advice, because it's become more and more apparent that as the story goes on that the Lipbacks, specifically John, saw a blank. When Stephen eventually stops, Rachel tells him they should just give their son the best last day they can. There's something about this scene, the finality, the acceptance of what's to come, how easy it seems for them to give up, that adds more weight to the scene. These aren't callous actions of parents that don't love their son. These are the actions of people that have lived through this before, but also like they felt it was inevitable, that no matter what they did, it was always going to catch up with them. Maybe I'm giving this scene more credit than it's due. Maybe I just don't want to believe Rachel and Stephen are complete monsters that don't want to even fight for their son. But this kind of links back to this idea that this is a tragedy, that the damage is done. And I don't like referencing it because it makes me feel really gross and dirty doing it. But if you've ever seen the famous photo of the two parents on the beach that won the photographer a Pulitzer Prize Award, it's because he had photographed the moment they realised their son had been pulled out by a riptide. And he captured the moment of their grief, the moment they realised they couldn't save their child. There was nothing that could be done. The best they could hope for was that his small body would be returned to them at some point. I think this book covers some of that in the way it's written. It certainly puts me in mind of the photograph. And I think that their reaction to the tragedy, Rachel and Stephen's reaction to something that they can't save their son Callum from, reminds me of that photo. It's not that they don't want to, it's just they literally cannot. And to back this up, this is not just a theory I'm coming up with on my own, that this tragedy, they can't stop it. Rachel thinks back to several instances involving the blanks and how they all ended, and how each of those there was no escape. It was inevitable. The tragedy was just worse if you tried to fight it. Like, for example, she thinks back to a summer they spent on the island where a new couple saw a blank and nothing they did saved them. In fact, it seems that whatever they did angered the blanks more and caused problems for the entire community. It's very clear that they apparently barricaded themselves into their home and they had a shotgun, but they were never seen again. I'm not going to go into more detail than that. I think that this scene has a lot of weight to it when you read the book, and I really want people to read the book, so I just don't want to ruin it too much. Anyway, the Savo in the vest starts to take on even more sinister meaning. I didn't mention it before, but Rachel talks about wishing she could lock the window to the guest room when she finds Cal staring out of the blanks. It struck me as odd, but I thought that maybe crime wasn't really an issue for the island, especially with the blanks swimming around. Now I think there was a different reason that the windows have no locks. Rachel thinks about how they moved away after that, how it was the fathers, Jen, that convinced them to come back, that it was safe, that they said only a couple of families had moved away. Even now, even in the face of her son's demise, Rachel doesn't blame them. She thinks they said it was safe and they were right. I think in that situation, I'd be placing a lot of blame on the people that told me it was safe. A lot of blame on the people that convinced me to bring my family back to the fucking island. It's like Rachel's been conditioned to agree with everything she's told, like she's been conditioned to never speak ill of the community. Stephen is active and throwing around plans and ideas, none of which will work, but he's trying. Rachel seems so passive. Stephen talks about running away. Rachel thinks back to the last time someone tried that and how it made things worse. Stephen thinks about barricading the house. Rachel thinks about that couple. The damage that they told the insurance company was because of the storm. And it's shortly after this that more people signed on to be safety volunteers. The Savo make people feel safe, but the reality is they're a lot like HR. They're not here for the interests or protection of the individuals, they're here to protect the community as a whole. They have very little power that they can do against the blanks, so there's not much point to having them other than to control the community. To make sure that the victims go quietly, the remaining family never return, and that the whole thing is chalked up to some plausible, normal explanation. Communities can't exist without people. If someone leaves, or if they're taken by a blank, that makes the rest of the community uncomfortable. They might leave too. That breaks down the community. It needs stability. It needs to feel safe. And the best way to do that is to pretend that the problem doesn't exist. The best way to do that is to let the blanks take their victim and stop the remaining people from ever setting foot on the island again. Banish them and the memory from the community's collective mind so they can keep pretending. The way Rachel handles all of this is like it's some kind of trade off. A piece of paradise for 16 years. 16 years of bliss and happy summers in exchange for one son and never returning to the island. It all feels unspoken. I did want to liken this place to a cult before, but I know that's a heated and heavy word, so I've done my best not to use it. But scenes like this feel very much like that, or at least cult-ish in their behaviour. There are other instances that Rachel thinks back on, but they all mean the same thing. No one is going to help them, because no one can help them. They've been knocked out of the community. For an idea of these instances, please read the book. The scene ends with them trying to make the best day for their son. I'm not sure why, but it didn't occur to me that they were basically saying this is Cal's last day. Like they're going to have to put him to sleep and want to make sure his last day is the best. I guess in my head, the first time I read it, the ferry was still an option, and that's what they meant by his last day. What I'm saying is, I think I was in denial about the whole thing. They spend the rest of the day acting like nothing is happening and making plans with Jen's family for that evening. Then later, Rachel makes an excuse to leave the house alone and visits Jen. Rachel tells Jen everything, tells Jen that Rachel feels responsible for her son's inevitable demise, and begs for help from someone she counted as a close friend. Rachel begs Jen to leave the island with them, to close down early and escape while they still can. Jen reassures Rachel, tells her things won't be as bad as she thinks they'll be, that it was only really bad once before, and that people exaggerate. There is a moment where Rachel thinks about a deal they made years ago, but I don't think this is an actual thing. I think it's more symbolic. Like, we made a deal with the universe that we would stay here and we would get 16 good summers with our kids and then pay the price, and we didn't even realize that was the deal we were making. Or we made a deal to ignore the blanks so we could visit paradise, and now that deal has failed because we didn't ignore the blanks. Something like that. I think if an actual deal had been made, they'd have discussed it more by now. Anyway, Jen's words calm Rachel down and she leaves. Once she's out the door, however, Jen calls to her saying that they can't make that evening's plans after all, so they'll have to do another night instead, and Rachel realises that Jen lied to her and that this is goodbye. Rachel just accepts it and moves on. And I guess you could say this mirrors Rachel's conversation with Cal from earlier. So the next bit I'm going to say is more my perspective on how I think Jen views the situation. So, to be clear, I don't think Jen was lying just to Rachel. I think she was lying to herself too. Jen, like all the summer residents, has to lie to herself in order to justify staying. So, from her perspective, the blanks got Cosmo because he was a dog. They got John Litback because he was a drunk. They got Tom because Tom died of a heart attack. They didn't get Tom. They didn't get Tom because Tom's demise can't be rationalised. Tom knew the rules better than any of them. The blanks didn't get Tom, his heart did. And it wasn't the blanks that got Cosmo, it was the deer. And it wasn't the blanks that got John Litback, it was the fact that they stayed outside a season. Blanks will take Callum because Rachel and Stephen are bad parents, or because Cal is a kid and kids are naturally curious. No, they have to be getting Cal because his parents didn't do enough to protect him, but Rachel and her husband are doing enough. Their kids will be safe. Anyway, getting back to the actual story and not just my speculation, the rest goes more or less as you'd expect. Rachel crumbles tablets into the kids' desserts, and when they pass out, Stephen takes them upstairs to bed. They lock C in the guest bedroom, and they put Cal to bed in his own room. They kiss him goodbye and then go downstairs and wait. I don't want to ruin this scene for you. It's beautiful and heartbreaking, and if you haven't read the book, then I don't want to take that from you. It really is something you had to read to experience. The grief here is palpable. That leaves Stephen and Rachel waiting, and eventually the blanks come. They break the glass in the door and pad up the stairs to where Cal is sleeping. Stephen wants to go out to try and do something, but Rachel stops him, saying, "Our daughter," I hiss, "is not going to grow up without a father because you wanted to pop the hood and look at the engine. I am not going to be a single parent because you wanted to do performative macho bullshit." And this reflects a conversation that took place at the start of the book between them and Tom Dogs, and him saying that whenever the car broke down, his dad would look under the bonnet even though he knew nothing about cars. He just felt the need to look, to do some kind of performance, basically, some macho performance, and how they're saying that that seems to be true going back through history, that probably the moment cars were invented, this started, and before that there was something else that was a performative macho thing that you did when things were wrong but you didn't know how to fix them, but you wanted to pretend you could. So that leads to the final scene as Stephen and Rachel cling to each other. The blanks do what they came for. Rachel holds on to sanity by thinking about what they need to do next. How they'll tell Z that Callum was caught in an undertow because he went swimming before they woke up, and that they'll tell her mother-in-law the same thing. That they'll tell the safety volunteers, and the word will get round. How she thinks people will understand, when in reality I think they'll pass out blame and reason why this happened to Cosmo, John and Tom and Callum, but not them. Never them. I think they'll breathe a sigh of relief that they finally got rid of the family that was clearly the problem. Rachel thinks about how she and Stephen will love C twice as hard, but we won't come back to Jekyll Island. The book ends there, but the reality is that though it feels like she's making the choice not to return, the family can't come back. They can't stay. The community won't allow it. The community is done with them and is spitting them out, but it will all be okay because even now they're protecting that same community. So for me, this book is all about the way community handles tragedy, the way something horrendous befalling a family, something completely out of their control, can lead to them being social pariahs. Even the ending, the utter helplessness of the parents, like a tragic accident, like he'd been pulled out by the undertow they made up, that talk about how blessed they were before that little bit of bad luck. Some parts of this reminded me of zombie movies. Don't click off, let me explain. The person that gets bitten or knows their family is infected, but they lie anyway. They lie because they don't want to give up safety or the community. We're social animals, community means safety. They also lie because they're in denial. They can't comprehend how this happened to them, to their loved ones, so they lie. They think only of protecting what means most to them. A very human trait, to survive whatever it takes, but one that's seen by the community as being selfish. You should protect the community first and the individual second. The community is its own living entity, and it won't hesitate to cut off an infected limb if it means saving the rest of itself. I don't doubt for a second that Jen was silently cursing Rachel during their chat, bringing the tragedy to her door. In Jen's mind, it must have felt like Rachel was bringing a curse or a plague down on them. Rachel is tainted, and in Jen's mind, there must only have been the fault of getting her out as fast as possible before she taints the rest of them. I also believe that Jen, like the rest of the community, thought it couldn't possibly happen to Jen or her family because they're too careful. Jen and her husband are better parents. Their kids are smarter. Unlike Rachel's family, Jen's family never stopped going to the island, so they have a better knowledge, better instincts. All the things people tell themselves when they see the mirror image of their own family or themselves go through something unspeakable. You have to convince yourself it can never happen to you. And I think this quote backs up what I'm saying quite nicely. No, Jen says, there was only one really bad night, but that was 20 years ago. All we know from before that is stories. We weren't even here, and you know how people are. They always like to make everything sound worse. The denial goes deep here. There's also something about how far you'll go to protect your version of paradise. Despite everything that happened, Rachel won't let go of the idea that this place was perfect. that it was almost worth it, despite the gut-wrenching loss. There's something almost obsessive in the way they approach this place, in the way they all approach this place. They know it's dangerous, but they ignore the danger. They can't let go of this place that has its hooks so firmly in them. They're aware they can't stop the blanks. They're aware it's getting worse, but they can't give up their community, their paradise. You can argue that's true of everything in life, like living in Los Angeles where there are earthquakes, or living near Mount Vesuvius. You're aware there's danger there, but it's your home. You live with it, you adapt. I'd argue this feels different though. Something they actually have an apartment where they live. This is just a holiday home. So you might try and make the argument, well, what about the money they've sunk into place? They'd never get that back, right? Nope. Rachel admits that houses on the island, even their section of the island, go for $1.5 million. She even says that the new people arriving are the people they will be selling their house to when Rachel and Stephen's kids leave for college. This implies they're going to get a pretty good return on their investment. This begs the question, why stay? Why come back even? They left because they knew it was dangerous. I don't think I really have an answer to that question. Stubbornness, FOMO, or because the community, their community, reached out to them and told them it was safe. Their community asked them to come home, and they did. They trusted their community with the most important, most precious things in their lives, and then when the community turned out to be wrong, they closed ranks and more or less pretended they had no fault or blame to play in what happened. It might seem unfair of me to place a blame like this. The decision to return ultimately lies with Stephen and Rachel, but I think that underestimates the pool of community, the pool of conformity. As far as the community is concerned, the rules are laid out very clearly. You don't acknowledge the blanks. You ignore them, you pretend they're dear, and if you tell yourself that enough, if you can make yourself believe, you'll be safe. In the scene where Rachel was in the kitchen with Jen telling her that Cal was dying, that he was unaware of the ticking clock above his head, but that it was terminal, and that nothing could be done, she's begging Jen to leave too, to protect her family while she still can, to do what Rachel still wishes she could do, to not fall to the same fate as Rachel's family. However, I believe all Jen hears is, I broke the rules and now we're being punished. To Jen, and to the community as a whole, Rachel's family transgressed. They started by acknowledging Sherry Litvak at the ferry, then they wouldn't stop talking about her, then they told the Savos about Tom, then Cal wouldn't stop looking at the blanks, wouldn't stop staring. To Jen, and maybe even to Rachel, they brought this on themselves. They should have ignored Sherry. Of the two children that were with Rachel that day, it was Cal that said how embarrassing about Sherry. He was the child that acknowledged her existence, and he is the one that the blanks came for. His curiosity, his inability to ignore things, to move on with his life, that's what got him. Equally, though, as his parents, should Rachel and Stephen have been more aware of his potentially fatal flaw? Should they have realised this place was extra dangerous for their son? And I think this quote pretty much covers how they feel about it. He should have known better, Stephen whispers, then rephrases. We should have taught him better. Mistakes is too small a word for the things parents do. Back in the kitchen, Jen comforts Rachel. But in light of what happens when Rachel leaves, this now feels performative and shallow. It casts doubt on past kindnesses. Was the whole thing a show? Were they only done because that's what was expected of someone in a community? Did you really care, or were you playing a role? Pretending to be a better person than you actually are, because that's what the community expects from you. That's how you fit in. That's how you stay safe. Many of their interactions are performative, like a scene I didn't mention earlier, but I'll mention now because I think it plays into what I'm saying. A new character is briefly introduced. Her name is Kath, and she openly talks about the blanks. Jen actively ignores Kath, taking her words and twisting it back to the narrative that Tom Docks died of a heart attack. Rachel is incredibly grateful for this distraction, which is taking place on a busy beach, and joins in, talking over Kath. Even the slight turn of Rachel's shoulders to exclude Kath from the conversation, the "do you want to have margaritas at ours tonight?" to Jen, not Kath, all of it is a performance. I think Rachel even convinces herself that Jen is performing for her, helping her. But we must remember, at this point, Jen is unaware of what's been happening with Callum. That means she's not performing to protect Rachel, she's performing to protect herself and her family. Pretend everything is normal, and it will be. Everything is surface level, surface value. Everything is, look, I'm still one of you because I ignored Kath. See how good I am at ignoring. That must be something I pass down to my son. If I pretend, if I ignore it, it'll all be better. That's how we've always done it. If this fails, it casts doubt on everything that came before it. There's a level of ignore it and we can keep living the lifestyle we love. Ignore the monstrosities around you because until they reach your door, they don't matter, and by the time they do, it's already too late and you must have broken the rules. Because the rules keep us safe. Don't step out of line and you'll be safe too. Having broken the community's rules, they are now cast out, a blight on the community they once loved. A community they thought would hold them closer in their hour of need, but a community that threw them to the wolves, to the blanks, at the first sign of infection. Everyone will have slept a little bit better after Rachel and her family left, because obviously they were the reason things were getting worse. They were friends with Tom, and he was the first to go, and a domino effect landed on Cal next, but it stopped there too. The blight is gone, the sacrifice made. The community will meet next year and pretend that Rachel's family never existed. If anything happens to Jen's family in the same way that it did Rachel's, Jen won't blame herself. She'll blame Rachel. But the reality is, the community will be just as harsh in its judgment of Jen if the same thing happens to her. It can't be that the numbers of blanks are increasing, that they're becoming bolder, that more people means more chances of an encounter, that the blanks are pushing back because their territory is being threatened by the human visitors. It has to be that you brushed up against something cursed, and that curse was transferred to you. Or that the fault lies with you. You should have known that family was bad, that the parents didn't do a good enough job teaching their children to ignore the blanks. There were signs everywhere, but you befriended them anyway. You invited them into our sanctuary anyway, and now you're paying the price. In the same way the Litvaks are blamed for staying beyond the season, those that meet with the loss of someone they love are also treated as ones that broke the rules. There's a sense that you had to give the blanks permission to destroy you, or at least from the community's perspective there is. That by looking at them, you're giving them an invitation to come for you because you ignored the rules. The community offered you paradise, and you still ate the forbidden fruit. Anyway, everything I've said about this book is speculation. It's entirely my own opinions and what I got from the book. Please feel free to politely and calmly tell me what you took from the book. If to you this was just a scary story, that's great. I meant that with sincerity. Everyone gets something different from books and stories. I don't always look for a deeper meaning in the books I read. For me, Dracula is just a great adventure horror story, and that's all it needs to be for me to enjoy it. For me, The Blanks is an amazing thriller horror, and if that's all it is for you, that's great. I just enjoyed analysing this one a bit more than I'd normally do, because something about it jumped out at me in a way that I want to talk about with others. Most of my friends don't read horror/thrillers, so I'm turning to you guys. Please keep all discussions polite and calm. Please accept other people can take away different opinions to your own. You don't have to agree with each other, but we should acknowledge when someone makes a good point, even if we don't agree with it. To say that this book terrified me doesn't really do it justice. There's something so inherently wrong about parents sacrificing their child like that. It would be different if they hated the place now, if they wished they'd never been there, never come back, but that's not how they feel. Jekyll Island has a grip on them. They lost their son and they still act like it's worth it. They slipped pills into their son's food and waited for the monsters to take him. I am aware there was nothing they could have done, and arguably they punished themselves by staying awake for the whole thing. They could have taken pills too, but they didn't. They made themselves listen. But they didn't regret anything. That scares me almost as much as the blanks. So yeah, I read this book before bed. That was a mistake. I spent the whole night expecting to hear those things break into my house, pad softly towards my bedroom, creak the door open, and attack me at my most vulnerable. Just an aside of something that came up to me while I was rereading the book before making this video. I'm not sure what to make of the fact that the blanks didn't come for Callum on the first night. It's hard to tell if his parents half expected them to turn up, and that's why they stayed with him, or if they thought he was safe. Their sleeping in the same room as him speaks to their fear, holding their child close while he sleeps, the way Rachel is jumpy and has to make herself calm down to sleep. Maybe the pretend it didn't happen method worked. It seems retribution from the blanks is pretty fast, so the idea that maybe it took them a day to find his home address seems like a stretch. That they all stood outside the guest bedroom window and not his own room does make it seem like they sought him out. Maybe he was already looking when they turned up, but that feels wrong too. It feels like he's compelled to look, like a trance, like the blanks need you to see them for you to give them permission to make you their prey. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Anyway, I rate this 10 out of 10 easily. I don't know what we're doing with this. 10 out of 10 golden dragon eggs? 10 out of 10 claws? Anyway, I give it 10 out of 10 eyes. Oh, I said eyes. Anyway, I give it 10 out of 10. It's my kind of book and from my kind of author. I fell into the story with no effort at all. I was able to imagine everything that happened as it happened and to picture Jekyll Island. This is a short story that does everything right for me. It's a short story that does just as good a job as a full length one, and that's no easy feat. If you're interested in getting this book, I got my copy on Amazon, but I also believe there's an audible version if you'd prefer that. You may think I've told you the story now, but I haven't. Trust me, I haven't. With that, I'm going to sign off on this one, my fair dragons. Thank you for joining me in my book review and creator sim. Take care of yourselves, my loves, and remember, they're just deer. If you ignore them, they're just deer.